Welcome to Emerging Franchise Brands, the podcast that introduces you to the visionary founders of America's fastest growing franchise opportunities. We'll also hear from industry pros as they share insights on what it really takes to achieve the elusive milestone of 100 plus locations. I am your host, Frank Fiume, founder of I9 Sports, and my 20-year journey from inception to acquisition has given me a unique perspective on how to succeed in franchising. Join me as we welcome today's guest. Before I start today's show, I have exciting news for founders, CEOs, and franchise brand presidents. Join me January 14th through the 16th, 2025 in Tampa for the first ever Emerging Franchise Brands live event, an exclusive opportunity designed just for you. It's my blueprint for success at every stage of franchising, one I wish I'd had, packed with real-world solutions and strategies to solve your challenges today and prepare for those you'll face tomorrow. Space is limited, so head over to emergingfranchisebrands.com to secure your spot today. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. On today's show, we have a very special episode. We have the president of Port of Subs, Healey Mendicino. Healey, how are you today?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me on, Frank. I'm honored to be here and I'm very excited. So thank you for that.
Oh, I'm excited to chat with you. Look, you're not an emerging franchise brand by any means. The company's been around for 52 years. We have so much to talk about because of the experience that you've had in the company, going from a founder-led brand for so long and now part of PE. And it's like you're emerging all over again, I guess, right?
Absolutely. It's a great way to put it. Perfect foundation.
Sweet.
No doubt.
So Healey, why don't we give some background story to Port of Subs for those that are not familiar with the brand that started, back in, is it 1972?
Indeed.
Okay. Well, why don't you share with the audience a little bit about the history of Port of Subs?
That's great. For the record, I was not the founder. I'm not quite that long of tooth yet. But so Port of Subs, amazing brand, best sandwiches on the planet. I know I'm biased, but it's because it's true. And it was founder-led by John Larson and his family. And they built the first 10 units as corporate units, and people started saying, hey, tell us about this franchising thing. So in 1986, the family decided to franchise and went through a lot of things that I suspect people who are in their own emerging brand mode have experienced, lots of ups and downs, but obviously it had a great story. And 1986 began franchising. I was introduced to the brand through actually a political affiliation. And fun fact, I was the 100th franchisee for the 100th unit.
No way.
Yeah, very cool. Back in 1997. So I've been around the brand a long time. I come by it honestly. And that was really fun because as we speak about for emerging brands, what is that to get to that 100th unit? What is that magic? How do we do that? And so to be the 100th franchisee and then be in the role that I am now is an honor. So it was a very exciting time and exciting time for me now. So I ended up with a second Port of Subs, so I loved being a franchisee. I absolutely fell in love with franchising. I love everything about it, and it's such a unique relationship and great to be part of that franchise environment. Last year, the family said, okay, we've done this long enough, 52 years, it's time to retire, do something different, sit on a beach, whatever, and we were acquired by the founders of Remax, Dave and Gail Linegar, and their partners in Area 15, and certainly franchising experts. And Area 15 is a PE firm, but it's really a family office. And so it's been a lot of fun to be around franchising icons. They have 9,000 franchises in 110 countries with 150,000 agents. So they're masters of franchising, but they've never been involved in the food service. And so when all of this came about, they said, we'd love for you to be our brand president, obviously an honor. And I was excited because they could share all of their franchising expertise and I could share all of the food service expertise and being a franchisee and franchisor. So It was a really great marriage and really exciting times for the brand. And let me add one more thing. Being a family business, we had huge tenure in our employees, 5 years, 18 years, 25 years, 13 years, and so on. And so when the acquisition happened, they said to me, do we need everybody? I said, we need everybody. We have an amazing team, an amazing foundation. And so through the acquisition, we kept all employees of Port of Subs.
Wow.
So,
right, I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it was wonderful. So, but that also led to a lot of fear and a lot of, we've been here a long time, and is the brand going to change? And is our food going to change? And what about new leadership and all of this type of conversation? And to be able to lead that culture change and that culture shift was really quite something to be able to do. And here we are. Surprisingly, time goes so quickly, 18 months later, and we have a completely different company with a regional developer model as our growth model for high growth instead of a regional brand with single unit growth, and focusing on national. And of course, Dave Liniger can't help himself. Global expansion is always top of mind for him. I said, let's start with the country first. That would be awesome. And so it's exciting. And I was thinking about, what would you say to somebody who's an emerging brand? And I can share some of the things that happened along the way and mistakes that I personally made that, certainly, I can share that list because I've done a lot of those, and that's how we learn. That's how we gain experience. That's how we build confidence to move forward.
Right.
But also as a regional brand going to a national growth, it's almost, there are some of the same elements, not all the same. But there are some of those same elements that I believe the emerging brands are going to be experiencing when you have growth pains of any kind.
Yeah, for sure. So Healey, tell me about, how did you get from being the 100th franchisee to working then in the corporate office there to becoming president? Like there was something in between there, right?
There was. I actually, being a 2-unit franchisee, so not big multi-unit, but it was still a wonderful experience. And I loved being a franchisee. As I mentioned, it's just a wonderful support to have when you're growing your own business. And especially when you're first starting, I was in my mid-20s. So it was great to have the support of a franchise. And I left for quite some time to develop real estate. That's my background, is commercial real estate. So I was doing my own thing for a while. And then 08 and 09, that was kind of an interesting time for many. And
sure was.
Yes, it was very interesting and dynamic. And our founder, John Larson, called me and said, hey, I know you're doing this real estate, but would you come over to the brand and set up our real estate and construction department and help with the growth of the company? And I said, sure, that would be amazing. I have an absolute love of the brand. I always have. And so it was very cool to come back to the corporate office. And then when I got there, after having my own business for so long, I really couldn't help myself. I said, great, we have to do this to grow and do that and do this. And he said, okay, why don't we just have you be the EVP and we'll grow this brand together along with the family. So it was very cool. And that was about 12 years ago.
Wow. And there's 230 locations that are open now, right?
We have 130 locations open. And as I alluded to earlier, we shifted from a single unit growth to the regional developer model. And so we now have 24 regions sold with 10 of our first regional developers and 230 units under development that are under contract for the next 5 years. So that was what you were channeling perhaps for the 230. So 230 units under contract, 4 new states that we've added to the mix, and our 10 first regional developers in a period of about 12 months. So we're very excited for the momentum we're having, and the whole team as this amazing foundation. Everybody's really excited and anxious for the future. And, there's a little bit of fear. I said,
of course,
we're doing exactly what we've been doing. We're just doing more of it. And everybody thought for a moment and said, okay, you're right, we can do this.
Not to mention, Healey, you do have some street cred with the franchisees, being former franchisee yourself. I mean, come on now.
It's true. It's true. But truly, and I sincerely mean this, the success we're having, the success of the brand, the success of having 10 regional developers who are excited is because of our existing franchise network. We have an amazing franchise network, and they're the foundation. And we've got really wild statistics. 15% of our brand has been in our brand 20 years or more. Almost 40% has been in our brand 15 years or more. So we have great tenure, great best practices, and the success really is because of the strength of our foundation. And our food's amazing.
And the food's amazing. Okay.
And our food's amazing. And we have a 2-foot brownie. Like what? Okay, let's do this. What?
Okay,
It's fun. It's a fun business.
All right, so we're gonna need your help here.
Right.
Much of my audience are founders of emerging brands, and we know when we're emerging, it's an exhilarating time. It's exciting, and it is scary at the same time. That's why I decided to do this podcast specifically for that time frame, because it was most exciting time for me. So I really want to help founders, and I think you and I together in our conversation, we can help fellow founders or people that are looking to invest in a franchise on things what they should look for in a franchise, and maybe some, avoiding some of the, red flag opportunities that are out there. So let's talk to those founders that are out there that are struggling. What do you think it really takes to break through as an emerging founder? I'm talking about those that have bootstrapped it. They're trying to not just sell franchises, but they're trying to become royalty sufficient as fast as humanly possible they don't want to run out of cash. What are maybe some of the pillars that you think go way back to Port of Subs in the earlier years on what does it take? Because those principles still work for today. I don't care what year it was.
I have so many things I want to share. So I want to start with, clearly, success in franchising starts with leadership, bar none. What makes the biggest difference in succeeding and not succeeding is leadership. And there are some things that are a given in this, right? If you're going to be a leader of a franchise, you're going to be a founding franchisor, you have to have grit to start out with, or your probabilities of success are already not going to be good. But presuming that people are already in that role, having that grit, but it's leadership. But what I would suggest to people is, it's like you said, it's an exhilarating time. It's fun. You're growing, and, having franchisees. I believe there's a tendency to overlook some of the simplicities of the foundation. First of all, you need to have an amazing product or service. Whatever that amazing product or service is, do you believe in your product? Do you have an amazing product and service? That's an important place to start. But also, and I get a little bit, I'm kind of a planner, nuts and bolts person by nature, but I think it's very easy to look at that shiny object and run so quickly toward it that there's a tendency for founders to forget that foundation. And so I would suggest the first place to start is, how do you make your system, and you have to be a systems thinker, how do you make your system so it's easy to duplicate? And it's not really super exciting for some to do a brand standards manual. Right. And an operations manual, and understand how to put forward marketing and those things in writing. That's not super sexy and sizzly, right. But I believe that to be one of the benchmarks of the foundation that you need to be able to have, because that's part of the gift you give to your franchise network is, we're going to show you best practices to be the best you can be. And in turn for that, you can relax on your monitoring of those franchisees as you build your franchise network. So That's the starting point. Do you have a good foundation? Coupled with that is, do you know your benchmarks? A lot of franchisors, they're excited, they kind of know. You better know your numbers, and you need to know your benchmarks, because that's also your second piece of training your franchise network on how to be successful. And I don't care if you have one franchisee. That person better know how to execute, be excited about it, be passionate for the brand, and know what they're shooting for in their benchmarks. So I think foundation is the first place to start, to make sure that that's solid, so you can build your skyscraper on that great foundation.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Healey. Too many founders, and I'm going to include myself in this, quite honestly, when we start out, the fact is, we just want franchisees to be successful, and we're willing to do whatever it takes. And sometimes it is going after, I don't want to say a shiny object, but giving them enough services to offer or products to offer, because it's almost like, you're just throwing darts at a wall and hoping, they'll get success somehow, right? So you give them enough things and thinking hopefully something will stick. I know I did that in my business, although it was service-based, and it was, in my case, it was sports. But like, for example, we gave all of our franchisees every sport under the sun to operate when they first started. And as you could probably imagine, if I could relate this now to the restaurant business or in the food services, if you gave your franchisees every possible menu item, that's just as dangerous, because now they're not honing in on what is the best product, and you don't even know who you are. And if you don't focus, you can't help anybody. And that was probably one of the biggest changes we made to our brand when I found that we were struggling, was to take away some of the services and to get really, really, really good at what our core was. And I think that is something to be said about making sure that as an emerging franchisor, that we're clear about it, and knowing your numbers too, like not just knowing your KPIs, but you've got to sell that story to the franchisee of a business mentor once told me years ago, you're basically showing them the road to Oz. How they get there, right? Because that's what's most important. It's not just saying you want to get to Oz. It's showing them really how they get to Oz. And KPIs, I think this mentor once said, he referred to KPIs as it's the autopsy after the patient is already dead. In other words, if you didn't show them on how to become successful, the KPIs are useless, right?
Absolutely. I love that. It's a true thing. I love what you said about when you shifted to your core and knowing your core. And you're right. I totally agree with you on that. You can't be all things to all people. Know your core, know who you are. And sometimes it takes a minute to figure out. And being able to show that path, because if the franchisees knew the path, they wouldn't be a franchisee. They would be doing their own thing, or they would be becoming their own franchisor. So I love the way that you put that forward about showing them the path to Oz. They can see Oz, but show them how to get there and make it easy, because then it's fun. When it's easy, it's fun.
And
right?
And speaking of fun, I always say that emerging period, it was exhilarating, because I'm talking now in 2024, but back in 2004, 2003, there was nothing exhilarating about it. We operated in many cases like, holy crap, like we've got a lot to do. But I wouldn't exactly, I wasn't exactly clicking my heels every night I got home and said, oh, this is so much fun. I was having fun, but it was also a struggle at the same time. You grin and bear it. You've got to, like, quitting is not an option. And you said earlier, you said it starts with leadership, and leadership is not easy. Doing what is popular is easy, but doing what's right is very difficult. And the bigger your brand gets, wouldn't you agree that, and founders, you guys got to hear this, that it is not going to get any easier the bigger your brand gets. And I'm sure you've been in situations, Healey, where as the president, you could have made a decision that would be quote unquote easy for everybody to like, but it wasn't the right decision. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, that's great. You laid a lot in there for me to cover and share. The leadership in making the right decisions. What is the right decision? I mean, it's our job as the franchisor to have the longer view, right? The longer vision. And it doesn't matter if you have 3 franchisees or 80 franchisees or 100, whatever the number is, but especially anywhere in there, our job is to provide stewardship for having that vision. We don't always have the answers. And when you talk about it being easy, I'm going to steal a playbook from the military. And I don't want to give credit to any particular branch. Yeah. But we've all heard this phrase, yesterday was the easy day.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that applies to franchising to the 100th power. And those successes and that problem solving is what makes it fun. And I'll circle back to the question you asked, but I also wanted to add that I cared about being an amazing operator, and I care about being the best franchisor we can possibly be and the best leaders we can possibly be. And, with expertise and focus, you're like, man, we got this. And then the wheels fly off and you're like, wait a minute. I thought we had this all together. How'd the wheels fly off? Well,
that's the franchise gods that are keeping you in check.
It's a thing. And so there's several things that I would add into that, and I'll get a little nutsy boltsy for a second. But the thing that we have to do is accept change, and accept that we're going to make some decisions that we believed at that moment with the information that we had are correct. And by the way, I would say this. When you speak of 2004, 2005, we didn't have the technology then that we have today for even understanding KPIs to bring that back into light. And so I think there's also a little bit of what's your capitalization versus the technology that you have to build your KPIs and understand them. We used to just sit down with a pen and paper going like this, and a few things from in our environment, the POS system saying, what was the labor? I don't know, and so on. And so that's been a really great thing for, I think, any franchise, no matter what your segment is that the technology is available, and it doesn't always have to be this big, huge, expensive platform. There's a lot of great platforms out there. It's rendering it down to the ones that serve you best. But change is going to happen, and you're going to make some, stub your toe along the way. And the important part is, especially for the founders, it's not a personal affront when you make a decision and it didn't have the result you wanted and the outcome was not what you were seeking. And sometimes just because you get it can be chaotic when you don't have the staffing that you need. Maybe you feel like you need 3 more people, but you can really only have 1 at that time as you're waiting for your franchise revenues to build. That X and Y crossing is a real thing in franchising. And so being able to say, okay, we're going to make these course corrections along the way and work to the best of the ability as a founder, not attaching your ego and your emotion to those decisions because they can't all be correct decisions. Mm-hmm. And so being able to say, oops, that was not okay. How do we, let's get out of the bog. Let's get back to the mainstream again. How do we make those decisions? And really working to not only accept change, but also to understand that the sooner you make those course corrections when you realize a decision that was made may not have been the perfect thing, to make those adjustments, and then be transparent about that in your communication with your franchise network. You don't have to be perfect. It's okay not to be perfect.
Absolutely. One of the challenges that I try to educate emerging founders with is this identity crisis, because as a founder, the truth is you and the brand are one for a while. I think the franchisors that truly succeed are the ones that can separate themselves from their brand, from their baby, and say, I am not my brand and my brand is not me. Once you can, if and when you make that break,
it's tough.
It is super tough. Did you feel like the family went through that because it was owned with them for so long?
It's 100%. It's a difficult thing to do. And so absolutely, it's hard for it not to be you, because it is you, and you pour your heart and soul and blood. And again, everybody who's been an entrepreneur talks about making payroll, because we've all been in that position.
Absolutely.
So talk about a motivating factor, and especially in this day and age, you don't have float like we did back in the day,
right.
But so that solutioning has to come very quickly. But those are the moments that make that success so incredible when you have it. But it is hard to extricate yourself from that. So
sure.
That's why that strategy about accepting change and knowing that there are things that are not going to go well. And I'd love to share about planning as part of the foundation. I'm a big proponent of that. You have to have discipline for that. And being able to have grounding pieces as a founder when you're going through those moments that are difficult, to make them easier to handle instead of, and having them be less of a personal affront.
Right. Because you have to realize it's not about you, founder. It was never about you. Now, I'm curious, Healey, you were the employee that was brought in, and you had to deal with the founding family that did have maybe that identity crisis where them and Port of Subs was one. I would love for you to share from your role, how did you carefully navigate that? And you didn't want to step on anybody's toes because it was their baby, but at the same time, they brought you in because they needed your leadership. So share with me about those challenges and how you navigated that very carefully, I bet.
Carefully is a great word. It was twofold. Not only was it founder run, it was also family run. The 2 daughters were in the business in varying capacities. And so the dynamics of the family are interesting in and of itself. So communication, just like any relationship, is paramount. And it wasn't always perfect. There were days where the family they'd have their heated Italian moments. And so some days you say, today is not the day.
Right.
And that old phrase, picking your battles carefully, is important. And I think what happens is the more a person can focus on an outcome and include people in that outcome through communication, helps with things to remove a little bit of that emotion. So my approach, every once in a while, I really did want to don a referee shirt and show up with the whistle and all and get ready to help with some of those meetings. But it was really about trying to have empathy for the other person, which can be very difficult. Sometimes you say, well, especially when you think the idea that's moving forward is the correct path and others disagree. So just like any relationship, it's trying to understand the other person. What are the needs that they truly have? Can you get to the outcome for the franchise network? Remember, in my view anyway, a reminder that the franchisee is the customer. That's our customer.
Yes.
That's our focus. That is why we are here. And it's a really interesting thing at the corporate office that I've seen not only previously, but in other brands where there's so much focus on the doings of the corporate office, it's almost like you forget for a moment, oh, wait a second. The franchisee is our customer. What are we doing to service our customer? How can we help them? How can we be better? And I believe that was my best way to say, what are we doing for the franchisees? How can we make this better and try to make it less emotional? Fast forward 18 months and through this big culture change. And once again, it comes down to communication, regular communication, transparent communication, and the realization that, yes, do we share every single thing with our franchise network that we're doing at the corporate office? Of course not.
Right.
But being transparent about the decisions that are being made and the reasons why become a path for lessening the emotion a little bit and being a little more mechanical about fostering a culture of excellence.
Sure. Yeah, I think as a leader, when we talk about transparency, it's having the franchise network understand the why. If they understand the why first, maybe the decision is something that they can swallow a little bit easier.
100%.
Yeah.
Funny you brought that up because I made a note here when you had mentioned, what would you say to franchisors about, how they're going to approach growth and all of this? The franchisors have to understand their why also.
For sure.
Why as a brand and why personally. And that can be very challenging. You could ask 100 people, and I suspect that a huge percentage of those people would have to go to the next room for a minute with a piece of paper and say, I'll get back to you. So that also carries you through those moments of both triumph, which are awesome, and those hard moments that are going to come, and some of those days where you're like, holy moly, what am I doing?
Yeah, I'm kind of reflecting on my own life here for a moment, my own career as you're talking, Healey. My why in particular for my business is that I wanted to make a difference in the lives of children. And I had an opportunity to do something that nobody had done in franchising by franchising youth sports leagues. Here's though was my Achilles heel in all that, is that because I ran programs too, I understood what the customers needed. And when I first started out, I think I know the mistake I made. I put the customer first before the franchisee, because what did I tell you my why was? It was to make a difference.
Change the lives of children.
And the children were the customers. And so if the franchisee, as well as I trained them, if they didn't do what I deemed to be the right thing, they heard it from me. And it wasn't until I made that shift and I realized that if I take care of my franchisees, they always take care of the customers. But it was when I tried to go over their head. If a customer called the corporate office and complained, I always took care of the customer, and regardless of what the franchisee said early on. And I realized that was a mistake. And I hope founders that are watching or listening to this, if they're making the same mistake I had made early on, they realize there's a difference between your why and how you take care of your franchisees. Because if you want to change the lives of your customers, do that through your franchisees. Don't go over their heads or through them like I did, because I know I rammed some ideas down their throats because I knew it was the best for their brand. It was best for my brand, but it might not have been the best thing for them where they were at their stage of business.
I love that conversation. I believe we've all done that because that's how you start. Our why in our organization is similar to yours. We're changing lives, one sub at a time. And that applies to the customer, the franchise network, our corporate teams, what we're doing. And I like to always say positively change their lives as well.
Sure.
It's such a unique business to have a vehicle to literally change people's lives. But back to what you were saying, very easy to focus on the customer or the guest or the sports person, the youth, whatever your segment might be, because that's what we perceive to be our lifeblood. And it is. We still have to make sure we're maintaining that. But exactly what you said, that was a shift for us as well, to be able to say, okay, how do we take care of our guests in our restaurants or in your muffler shop or your service business or whatever kind of business you happen to have? How do you take care of that guest? But yes, I think it's a very important conversation that you have to empower your franchisees and work through your franchisees and remember that they are your customer. Then they will deliver that. And by the way, for many franchisors and founders, that feels less fun to a degree.
Because you're giving up control.
And you're giving up that connection of that, you wanted to be with the kids. You're like, I got this.
Right.
Get over here, all you kids,
Right, you
and
saw
so
the
now
difference.
You're putting yourself as a franchisor in an administrative role. Mm-hmm. Now, if it's important to you to have contact with your customers, whatever those customers may be, if that's an important piece for a founder, find other ways to do that. Join some of those community events, do those marketing pieces and openings and all of that, and find your joy that way. But when you're a franchisor, your franchisee is your customer, and it's an administrative role of leadership to lift your franchise network. And it's a great. I love how you put that on the table. It
was the truth. It's what really happened. But more so, I think, also, Healey, what you're saying is that if a founder really loves that connection with the end user and the customer, then go out in the field more. Because if nothing else, your franchisees are going to love it when they see that you've taken the time to talk with them and you get a chance to, hang out with them and talk to their employees and talk to the customers, because it makes the franchisee feel special. One of my most special moments when I owned my business was that I took a trip finally out to Hawaii with my president of my company to visit our Hawaii franchise owner, who had been successful in many, many years. They always invited us to come out. And I always heard about the community out in Hawaii on how close they were and how much they loved our brand. And when I got out there, I didn't realize how important our brand was to this community until I saw it for myself. But to your point, that is a great vehicle for a founder that is listening to this, that if you really do love being around your customer, go spend more time out there with your franchise owners then.
They love that. It means something to them. It shows caring. And again, everybody wins, right? Founder gets to have all, again, you said you didn't know until you saw it.
I did not.
And what a great thing to say. And be in the field. The franchisees love it. And here's what I add. This is a sound bite from others, Adam Contos in particular, who's our interim CEO, who was the previous CEO of Remax, and he's got a leadership program that's very cool. So I take sheets from his playbook quite a bit. And one of them that's very cool is presence brings trust. Visibility and presence brings trust. And so, imagine you get to be out in the field. The franchisees are ecstatic. You get to touch your end customer. It's just everybody wins. It's a good vibe for sure.
Yeah. Well, I want to, let's fast forward a little bit here, because I do want to talk about private equity, which is obviously very much involved in franchising more now than ever. I'd love for you to share what you could share. What was you think one of the determining factors for the family when they decided, I think it's time for an exit? What was that like, that time period? And what were some of the conversations?
Yeah, some of them were very difficult. You speak about, I think for the family, particularly for the founder, it was a little bit like chopping the arm off, right? It's such a part of you and so on. So they were difficult conversations, but some of it was, you get to a point in the organization, and it's kind of like in boxing or UFC or something. Everybody always says the fighter's the last guy to know that he's, not fighting the way that he used to.
Absolutely.
And I think that can be that way for founders, and particularly for founders who've been doing it for a long time is, first of all, are you still having fun? Let's face it. It's a lot of hard work. It is relentless focus But it's supposed to be fun. Like, what are you doing if it's not fun? And I don't mean every minute. We spoke of that earlier, but at the end of the day, it's got to be fulfilling and it's got to be fun. So A, is it still fulfilling? Are you still feeling energized by your organization and your teams? And, and if you're not, can you change that? Maybe not. But they'd been doing it so long, and the two girls had been in the business for, well, their entire lives since they were 12 or old enough to stand on a milk box to use the cashier that you can't do anymore. But anyway, so they had done nothing but that their whole lives as well. And they'd all done extremely well financially. And it was just time. And so a decision has to be made. And I think that pivot point was, we're either going to reinvest in our brand, because the brand is amazing. We have fierce brand loyalty. It's awesome. So the brand is strong. The network is strong. But the decision was, we're not growing. We're not really growing. We don't have this big momentum. We're either going to reinvest in the brand for this level of growth, or it's time to move on. And I think that was really, if one could render it down to the bottom line, that was really it. And nobody in the family was so elated to go, you know what, let's rock this.
Yeah.
And I think for them, it was the perfect decision. It was a hard decision, but it was a mature decision, and I think it was the perfect decision. And they get to enjoy their lives and all the fruits of their labor in building this beautiful, strong brand, and enjoy it, because taking it to the next level, again, we're at 130 units and so on.
Right.
To go to that next level takes a completely different mentality and a completely different set of infrastructure. And we're governed by how we think. Our outcomes, how we approach life, is governed by our thoughts and how we want to do things. And so for them, it was the right decision.
Yeah. Well, if you really, truly love your company, you give it what it needs, and sometimes it's not you.
Right.
And new voices are really, really important to bring into an organization. And I'm talking, leadership voices, not just, having somebody, in a role that doesn't have any real power. And it opened up, it created a gap of opportunity for Port of Subs to really be able to take things to the next level, because regardless of how much the family loved the brand, the things that are able to be done now with the expansion, maybe they didn't have, it's more than just they didn't have the know-how or the experience. They could have brought people in, but it's that vision. If it's not part of your vision, and if the company is, again, going to provide tremendous value, you've got to bring in new people. And obviously selling it is one way of doing it.
Absolutely. I like when you said, if it's not you. I mean, that takes a good hard look at we're back to, what's your why? Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
What do you want for your life? And especially in business, we get so focused on our business outcome only, when in all reality, we should start with, what do you want your personal life to look like? That really should be the better starting point. But few of us ever do that. We say, okay, what's our business plan? And then we're going to sprinkle in our personal life later once we sort that out, and
because we're taught that.
We are taught that. And so maybe just that little shift, but to be honest about, that wasn't their DNA. It's not how they grew the brand. They grew the brand from being extremely hardworking people. That is their foundation. And their why was working hard with the franchise. It grew exactly the way they intended it to, for who they were, to your point. And so, and I think that's relevant to the founders on this call. Don't fool yourself,
Right.
Start with your personal life and what you want that vision to be, whatever that is for you, and then build your business to that outcome and know what you're going for and what your DNA is all about. For me personally, I'm now in my best role of my entire life. I get to be myself for the first time, really, truly.
That's
so
amazing.
I'm very excited. Oh, very exciting. Because that was always in me. This growth piece and structure piece and systems, I'm elated. I'm on fire. It's wonderful. And but I needed that foundation piece with the family to get there as well. So it's a win-win for everybody involved.
Yeah, and for your franchise owners, I think that you do hold a distinct advantage over a lot of brands that have exited via private equity. And you touched on this. I heard it. You mentioned family office. Most franchisors that sell will sell to a private equity firm. It's not typically a family office. And we know that there is a there's a process for private equity. They have a role. They know exactly what they're going to do with the company, for how long they're going to do it, and the numbers they want to hit, and they're going to sell. Yes. And I'm not sure are you familiar with Alicia Miller? She wrote a tremendous book. It's one of my favorite books. It's called Big Money in Franchising. I had Alicia on the show months ago. And one of the trends that Alicia talks about in franchising is she believes that we're going to see a distinct increase in private equity purchasing franchisors, but specifically family offices. And the big advantage with a family office owning a business is that they don't have that exit strategy or that short runway exit plan that your typical private equity does. And I'm not sure if your franchise owners are aware of that this distinct advantage, but you are a great advantage for your current franchisees and future franchise owners, is that they're probably going to want to hold on to this for a long time and make the best possible brand they could. And it's not a short-term thing. Maybe you can touch on that.
Yeah, that's great. Perfectly said. It is a big difference. And because it gives you a mindset of building. When you have a mindset of building, it is different than typical PE. Here's the thing for PE. This drives me crazy a little bit. People know if it's typical PE, that's the goal. Whatever the goal is, it's numbers, it's money, you're going to sell it, and that's okay. I wish they would speak more directly to that. Include but they get fearful of that because you don't want people exiting and you're trying to still build the brand. And that, what kind of culture is that? We're really touching on that culture piece, right? And so I think it's okay to be that. There's nothing wrong with PE. It brings huge infusion to the brand and brand recognition and marketing dollars and growth and all the things that go along with that. But again, I'd love to see the trend go whereby there are leaders that they can put in place, especially in any given industry.
Sure.
Right? Pick a leader from that industry, because PE doesn't typically have that expertise. Right? You got the analytics guy going over there with his paper saying, all right, well, okay, you're going to go over here, when a brand still needs the love of some expertise of that particular segment and category. So I'd love to see a little bit of shift. I think it would inure to the benefit of PE in a great way to be able to have that, saying, this is what we're going to do. Mm-hmm. Just because they're going to sell doesn't mean that it doesn't make the brand great and better. But talk about it. Have a conversation about it. Build a culture that says, we're going to grow and make it awesome, and you're going to get the support that you need because that's what you're paying for. Mm-hmm. And this is how we're going to grow, and these are the benefits to that. So, but on my end, personally and selfishly, it's wonderful, to your earlier point of being with a family office where the goal is to build. And we've got Dave Linegar time, which means he can do things in 4 minutes. And as I share with him, the rest of us mere mortals may need a little bit longer. But, he'd like to do with Port of Subs what he did with Remax.
Wow. And
instead of 50 years for him, he used to say 6 years. Well, I think it started out as 5 or 10. Now I think it's down to 3.
Wow.
So I said, can we settle on a 4.7? I don't know, but it's a fun conversation. But it's a conversation about a philosophy that he has held for his entire life that we all easily resonate with and absorbed, and that is everybody wins. Mm-hmm. Imagine if you get up every day and you think about your franchise network and your team members. I don't care if you only have 2 team members. Those are still your team members, right?
Yep.
It doesn't have to be this, whatever your organization is as you grow. Imagine if you woke up every morning and said, okay, everybody wins today. How do I make that happen? And what would that change in your culture and how you approach the world in your franchise?
Oh my gosh, that makes it so much more fun to wake up in the morning where your only goal is, how do I make everybody win? It's a challenge, but it's like a fun challenge.
Right. Even the franchisees that drive you crazy, by the way, because we all have them.
We do. They need us. That push-pull relationship is really important. It's like a professional sports team. Not everybody's going to agree in the locker room, but it's that push-pull mentality where we're pushing each other to get better. As long as we all are rowing in the same general direction, it's okay to have those challenging conversations. We're not going to agree with everybody. They're not going to agree with us.
And, quite frankly, we talk a lot about, no pun intended, we talk a lot about our bottom 10%, right?
Yeah.
Because the top 10 are going to do what they do anyway.
Right.
Matter of fact, having had corporate units, and I don't know what the mix is for the franchisors and founders that are on the podcast, but having many corporate stores at one time. And, our top franchisees outperform us. They just do. And so I say the best ideas come from the field.
True.
We think we're pretty good at the corporate office, but the bottom line is the best ideas do come from the field. You got to keep guardrails around it. We know. But so with that kind of thought process, we're all going to have the people where it just didn't work out. And sometimes it's life circumstances for those franchisees. It's not because they're sitting around thinking about how they're going to hit the smite button, just whatever their variables are, that bottom 10%. But I also have a very open conversation with our team about, we're not going to focus on that bottom 10% either, because that's one of the other challenges that I think comes forward is, gosh, you got to really focus and help your people. Yes, you do by giving them the tools, but focus on your middle group, because those are the people that are engaged, they're doing well, they're not performing like your top people, but they can and they want to, and it's your job to show them how. And then hopefully the bottom 10 will go, hey, wait a minute, if that guy down the street can do that, I can lift myself as well.
Absolutely.
But don't spend 80% of your time on the 10 or 20% of the people who are not on the same boat as you, and eventually they'll sell their units to somebody who's super excited. So
exactly. And you as the founder or president are going to be extremely frustrated if you continue to just focus on bringing up the bottom 10, because we don't want people to fail. But founders and presidents need to remember that sometimes the reason why somebody's in the bottom 10, they might have been the right person, but at the wrong time in their life to own a business. Things happen. And so it's not just bringing on the wrong person. It is wrong timing. But you and we could talk to the bottom 10% of our franchise network till we're blue in the face. Sometimes it takes somebody from that middle pack that rose from the depths of close to the bottom 10 and rose up, and they listen to them. Suddenly, it's like kids. You can tell your kids something, but in sports, I give my son maybe some advice, and he would listen kind of, but then the coach would tell him something else. It was the same literal advice. And then suddenly it was like, an epiphany that coach told me to do X. It's the same thing with franchisees. Sometimes they will listen to somebody else, specifically to their peers in franchising, and more so than maybe the franchisor. But trying to get that middle group up is really what's going to elevate the entire network. Those are the people who are still engaged, because it's hard to help somebody that doesn't want to help themselves. Also, when it just comes from a timing, not only is timing could be bad, but I found too, if somebody was beyond, I don't want to say beyond repair, but beyond savable, the tough thing is getting somebody to invest in marketing specifically once they felt like all hope was lost. Right. And if they don't spend money on the marketing, the game is over. This is just a matter of when the ship is going to completely sink. But enough of that. Let's. I want to go back.
I know we deviated from family office to culture piece to.
And we can go all over the place here. I do want to get back to just where the company is going now. So, why don't you share with the audience here, where is Part of Subs going now that we've got family office backing, everybody is re-engaged and ready in this new emerging era for a brand that's been around for 52 years.
Truly. It truly is. There really are some parallels. I think the distinct advantage we have is our capitalization is different. And so that's a big marker for emerging brand versus, we consider ourselves like a national expansion emerging brand. Our capitalization is obviously different. So for us to take our amazing foundation and shifted the growth model to a regional developer model, whereby people can have a territory of 500,000 people and commit to a minimum of 10 units to develop. Obviously, we have brick and mortar. People in service business have to figure out what that online space looks like for them, for their growth and how you want to grow. But we're being prescriptive about it. This is the growth we want to have. And part of it is because we are a very community-focused company. And it's something we've always been. And we don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk. It's an important piece for us. Not only our community within our own company, but the communities we're involved with is so important. Giving back to being part of the fabric of that community. So the regional developer program, as we've architected it, is you have to have a flagship unit as the regional developer. In your unit, you have to be a franchisee, know what it's like to be a franchisee, but also to be part of that community to continue the community focus. You know, we talk about Port of Subs being your neighborhood sandwich shop, and we mean that. We don't want it to ever feel like just a chain, you know, just a place. We want that to be a sense of community and a sense of belonging, and what we do with, you know, yes, corporate responsibility, but really there's a give and take in any business, and to be part of the schools and the sports, which is near and dear to you, and part of that fun and that we can give to each other. Once again, everybody wins is a really cool mentality. And so that's part of the idea of that flagship with our regional developers, to be able to duplicate that feeling and convey that and build out these beautiful communities. And so that's very exciting for us. And then the momentum that we have, again, it starts when you have a great product, and we really do. I'm anxious for anybody who hasn't tried Port of Subs to try it. It'll become your best favorite sub sandwich you've ever had, and then you can pick up a 2-foot brownie or 2-foot brookie or whatever you want. But it is a fun business to operate. But it's and food is great, right? Breaking bread and all those kinds of things. But our growth is really our franchise network, our systems. We focus very much on the foundational pieces of a system for duplication. I am a big proponent of this, and we'll talk about, again, national growth. We're already opening up 4 states. We have 9 flagship units coming out of the ground in between Q1 and Q3 of next year as the foundation for the growth. And now imagine you have 10 regional developers, 20 regional, 30. Imagine if they only have one franchisee. Now, obviously, we want them to have 10 and 20 franchisees underneath them. So it becomes exponential very quickly. So our focus is infrastructure and planning, but it still applies, and it's one of my hot buttons for sure, is having the discipline to plan. Because you know things are going to go wild in an emerging brand. They're just, things are going to happen, as we mentioned earlier, that go away from your plan. But part of it is by having the discipline to make that plan. And by the way, for most people, that's not fun either, right? It's kind of a slog. All right, we got to get this down. What are we really going to do? No, you have to make those decisions on paper. And so, again, for many, that's not like, woohoo, we get to write down our business plan. But having the discipline to do so changes a bunch of things. First of all, it allows you to talk through your permutations of what can happen. What kind of staffing do we need? How many of our units or our service people or our servicemen or technicians or whatever the brand requires, how many do we need, and how many customers can we service, and so on. And it also provides a grounding point that when you're standing in the middle of the stream and things don't go to plan, as they often don't, you at least have something to come back to say, okay, what did we talk about? What did we say was our outcome? How are we doing? Where did we go off the rails? It at least gives you a place to come back to. Because if you don't have that, now you're in the middle of the stream and you got a couple hornets on your head, and now you're trying to make those decisions. That's not the time to make the decision.
Right.
That's the time to say, wait a minute, what did we say we were going to do? Oh, that's right. Okay, let's get back on track and really have that grounding point. Again, for our growth and supporting the franchisees, and we have those growing pains too. If all of a sudden you have, it's a good problem to have, I'm not complaining, but if all of a sudden you have 10 or 20 or 30 units that are going to be coming out of the ground, and you've never done that, you've only ever had 8 openings or 10 openings or 5 or 12, and now you do 25 or 30. And by the way, people say, oh, that's super easy. I said, okay, let's put it in perspective. That's 1 every 2 weeks. And then everybody says, oh my gosh, oh. Right. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So we have some of those similar pain points of saying, who do we need? How you can't just overload your overhead. How do you weave that in by the time that you have those needs for, in our case, those store openings? And so we all sat down as a group and said, everybody contribute what your thoughts are. We're going to put it in a big bowl, and we're going to line out the common themes of the strongest needs of our organization so that we can minimize the amount of chaos and extra energy that's not needed by having that type of a plan. If you're going to lose a wheel, lose one wheel, not all 4, right?
Right, exactly. With that said, I think you and I need to do a little public service announcement, because there are the bootstrapped emerging founders that are listening to this going, what? Okay, wait a minute, regional director model. I didn't think about this. Wait a minute, you mean to tell me I'll sell that large territory and then they have to go ahead and they'll open units? Wow, that sounds like I get to open faster. using their money, and it's almost like, multi-level marketing. So maybe you and I need to slow them down for a second and warn them on why Port of Subs can do it and they can't, because it is definitely not for the faint of heart.
Not for the faint of heart. Yes, I agree with you. I've used this word a lot, and because I strongly believe in it, it's that foundation. Mm-hmm. You have to be buttoned up and have a foundation and have your systems in place. And by the way, on the regional developer, yes, it is an awesome growth model, but also it's a different type of franchisee. It is somebody that really is going to become a mini franchisor. They have to become experts as one person or one group as they build a structure to do all the things that we do individually. Marketing, franchise recruitment, your initial sales, training, operations, store opening, construction for us, all of those types of things. And now this person has to have all the tools and learn how to do that. So it's not a small undertaking, and it's not a single unit franchisee mentality is not the right match for being able to conduct that role. This is a business role. So it is a form of a growth strategy to use, but your foundation and your systems have to be absolutely buttoned up. And I think that's a challenge for emerging franchisors where, first of all, you have to show proof of concept in your own brand. You have to know that your brand is going to be successful and sustainable. And so, does the market love your product? Does the market receive your product? Are you adapting to how you're going to integrate into whatever it is, your service business? If you have a brick and mortar, which brings a different level of capitalization than a service business. And so all the considerations that each founder has for their own brand is that the proper growth model? For an emerging brand, it can be, but once again, that's a very prescribed model and thought process and level of capitalization, because you have to support all of those people. What if you sign 20 people? Okay, that's all really cool. That's fine. You better be prepared to support those people. So if you have that, great. It might be a consideration, but definitely I agree with you on the caveats to that. Oh. It's easy to write it down on paper, but you actually have to execute, and that's where it's a fierce way to grow, for sure.
It sure is. I'll tell you one thing, it'll magnify your flaws in a real quick hurry.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, to everybody.
To everybody. Oh, you'll know where all your problems are in a moment, in a heartbeat.
Well, maybe you'll be inviting me back next year saying, how'd that work out for you guys?
No, I know you guys can do it. Win. I know you can do it.
For sure.
Healey, this has been incredible. It's been a pleasure talking with you for the past hour here and meeting you. If someone was interested in learning more about the opportunity of Port of Subs, where would they go?
Obviously, they can go to our website, portofsubs.com. And I also have an email, Healey, Healey, at portofsubs.com. I'd like to add just a couple of things,
Please.
If I may. I love your podcast so much because if I had to look back over all of my time with Port of Subs as a franchisee, in the middle, as franchisor, and so forth, two things are top of mind for me that I would like to share with your audience. And one is the importance of having mentors and exposure to people who have gone places that you have not. You do not have to reinvent the wheel. If I could go back and do it over again, I would have put more focus on, and it doesn't have to be a direct mentor. It can be your podcast or your upcoming conference in January. Looks fantastic.
Thank you.
Middle of January. Yes. And so what a great opportunity for emerging franchisors to be in person with you and your group. But if it's your conference or the IFA or we now have YouTube and podcasts and blogs and all these types of things, but having an outside focus on leaders who are in your industry, pick your industry, find those leaders. If you can connect with them personally, fabulous. Find those people in your industry that have gone where you want to go and take as much from their playbook as you can so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. The other two things that I would say are a couple of things. Leadership makes all the difference. Culture eats strategy for lunch.
Oh, yeah. I like that. Lunch. I like that. I got that. I picked up on that one's not getting past me. No.
Thank you. I know nothing gets past you. I know that. But truly, leadership and culture and communication are the cornerstone of successful franchising. And, and do the right thing. Because at the end of the day, whatever decision you make, do the right thing and everybody wins. Is a cool approach to franchising.
Well, Healey, thank you so much. You always in the episode with the tip jar, but you just did that. You just gave some great advice. This whole hour was awesome. I hope that emerging founders watch this and listen to it and take the advice that you've given. You've been so great on the show. I thank you, and I wish you continued success with this brand, this 52-year-old brand, and looking forward to a location opening in Tampa at some point.
Not very far away. I think Orlando will be first, but Tampa should be shortly thereafter. So we're gonna put that on the pinpoint on the map.
I will be there. Healey, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I'll look forward to meeting you in person one day.
Sounds great. Thank you, Frank.
See you. Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fiume, or Emerging Franchise Group, LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.